My job is to be in my booth in front of a microphone pretty much all day. And I've been thinking, if I could have just one mic for the rest of my career to cover every situation, every gig, what would that mic look like? What does the ultimate mic look like to me? It's a condenser, of course. That part, it's obvious. I need all the detail. But I want some trimmings. I want a sturdy case to protect it when I'm not using it. It's got to have a fantastic shock mount. I want an excellent windscreen, built in but removable. Should it be a FET mic? Maybe a tube mic to bring out some character. It's got to be cardioid. I mean, voice acting and all, but maybe a wide cardioid would be sweet. Just get a little bit of proximity effect. But I got a furnace. When that kicks in, you get that rumble, so maybe I want a hypercardioid to try and hide that noise. Maybe somewhere in between, something like a more than supercardioid, but not quite hypercardioid. Get that proximity effect when I need it, dial it away when I don't. Can't I just have all the patterns? Should it be clear and transparent for absolute fidelity, that really modern sound? Maybe I want something a little darker, get that vintage sound that's worked so well. Maybe a little character, something with warmth so it doesn't sound clinical. Some saturation would be nice, help cut through the mix when I need it. I want to be able to dial in just what I want for the situation. Should have a high-pass filter, 40 hertz, 80, but that furnace, maybe I need 120 hertz high-pass from time to time. A pad switch would help when things get really loud. 6 dB, maybe 12 dB. Although there have been times when I get all Glenn Fricker and I really got to get loud, and something like 20 to 25 dB would have saved a take.
Shut the f*** up, Marvin!
Oh, and no plugins. I want this mic to be the real deal, forever, not pretending to be something else. I want to be able to take this mic to any studio, anywhere I work, without having to drag a USB stick around with my iLock and hope they have the right software. I want it to work when I change computers, operating systems, no plugins. Who knows what the future holds? So, that's my list. I just want a FET tube mic that has every pattern, is bright and dark and warm and saturated, that works no matter how loud I get, and has all the right high-pass filters for the situation. I hear you saying, Mike, that's at least 5 different mics, probably 10. You're going to need a whole locker to get all that, my friend. Dream on. I just want one mic to rule them all. Too bad it doesn't exist. Until now. Channel my inner Jeremy Clarkson here. This is it. What may possibly be the ultimate microphone. This is the Lewitt LCT1040. And Lewitt has been working on this microphone for something like 7 years to bring it to fruition. And I'm glad they did. I remember seeing little videos about earlier prototypes. And I've been very excited about this microphone. And everything I described in my earlier wish list is right here in this microphone. I wasn't kidding. If you like its overall tone, this could be the mic for, very nearly any situation. Now, Lewitt loaned me this microphone to make this review. I'm not compensated to make the review, but they have no editorial input. They won't see this video before you do. They have no idea what I'm going to say. They don't know if I'm going to like it or not. I'm really going to walk you through, as far as I can, all of the features and functionality, show you everything that I know how to make the mic do. But in the end, it's got to go back, which kind of breaks my heart. If you're interested in this mic, it's going to cost you around $3,500, and I think that same price is US or Euro. If you do want to purchase the mic, I'll have some affiliate links in the description. Doesn't change the price for you, but it would really help the channel out if you're interested in buying it. It's up there in the rarefied air. It's right up there with the other flagship microphones, certainly price-wise. But let's see what the mic can do. Let's see if it deserves to be in that spot, and you'll hear it and you'll make that judgment call. So let's get into it. It's a condenser microphone and a hugely configurable one at that. And it's both a tube mic and a solid-state FET mic all at once. Let's start with the mic in FET mode. Now, there are tons of configurations for this microphone, but weirdly, when you look at it, there are no buttons or switches or anything on the mic. There's just this tube window in the front where you can see the tube glowing and a logo on the back. So how do you configure it? Well, like many tube mics, there's an external power supply. What they've done is they've added all the configuration knobs to the power supply module, which they call the remote. Now, on the remote, you'll see a nicely laid out user interface right here with clear access to all the functionality. There's so many functions, trying to squeeze them all onto the body of the microphone, I think would be virtually impossible. On the remote, there are 5 knobs. On the left, there are 2 that control the tone of the microphone. In particular, the characteristic imparted by the tube stage of the mic. And on the bottom left is a dial where you can dial in between the solid state, the FET sound of the microphone, and the tube stage, or any combination of both. You can fine-tune various gradations of the tube stage by moving the dial from all the way on FET, where it is now, all the way over to tube, and really anywhere in between. Now, what's cool here is on the remote, it's actually outputting 2 signals. There are 2 jacks on the back. One is the solid-state output, labeled FET, and the other is whatever the mix is from this dial on the front. With the knob all the way over on FET, the signals are virtually identical. So now I'm going to move the tube stage to the clear setting, and I'll A/B this with the FET mode and see how it changes. So I'm going to switch it over to fully in the clear mode. Now, I don't expect that you'd actually even want to have the 2 outputs to be perfectly matched gain-wise. What I can see is probably a more beneficial case is to have the mix channel be your preferred tone and the FET channel be gained down on the console as a backup take or an effects take or anything else you want to do creatively with it. Similar to how a guitarist might take the pure DI of the track and a wet track with the effects. This essentially gives you 2 outputs. You get the tube sound and the FET sound. Now, there are different settings for the tube. There's clear, warm, dark, and saturated. And the difference between these is it's subtle. You can hear them quite clearly when you phase invert the mix channel from the FET channel, but I want to say up front, this is not a modeling mic. You're not going to push the mic into crazy over-the-top overdrive states like you can with plugins. If you really want to manipulate the signal like that, you would still use a plugin. This system puts at your fingertips a wide variety of common mic tones with one piece of equipment to find the very best tone for whatever talent or instrument is behind the mic. It's not an effects mic. This is for great reproduction of the original sound. So, I could definitely see this being the first mic to try when you're shooting out a bunch of different mics in a new session in the studio. And only after trying all the different combos here would you then need to go to the locker. It would not surprise me at all to hear that some studios are saying that this is their new go-to mic because of its configurability. Okay. So let's move the knob, the tone of the tube characteristic from clear to warm, and we'll see how the tone changes. I'm going to keep this all the way over on tube for the output, and I'll switch back and forth between the FET output and the tube output just so you can get a sense of the difference and how it sounds. So while we're doing that, let's talk about the remote for a second. I personally think that this is really well thought out for everything that it does. Initially, it's both the configuration unit and the power supply. And I'm not going to pick it up here, but it's surprisingly heavy. It's actually the power supply portion that's heavy. So you might want to put that down on the floor. It's way, way too heavy for a music stand. But that's actually no problem. With a push of the button on the front, the remote can be separated from the power supply. So now the PSU can be on the ground and the remote can be up at desk level. You just jumper the two together with a typical XLR cable. And Lewitt says that cable can be up to 150 meters long. That's pretty cool. Let's make a switch here. I'm going to move it down to dark mode now, and I'll keep toggling it back and forth so you can hear the difference between the FET mode and the dark mode here. So you can separate them, and that's neat and all, but what does it mean for you? Well, it means that the PSU can be near the mic where it needs to be. Like any tube mic, this mic needs a PSU, but the remote can be back in the control room using your regular XLR cables. So for a total of 3 XLR cable runs, you can get 2 different mic signals, the FET signal and the mix signal, and the engineer at the desk can dial in that mic setting right from the sweet spot in the control room, wherever that is, up to 150 meters away. So you don't have to worry if the control room is far from the studio, or if you're in a huge recording space. You're covered, and the engineer can make decisions from the control room instead of going back and forth, changing microphones. Okay, one more switch. We'll switch over to the saturated mode now, and I'll keep toggling them. Okay, so you get this great big PSU unit, all the configurations on the remote's far away, but what if you need a stereo pair? Well, that's been considered here too, and I think they've made a really good decision here. First, similar to the Lewitt LCT1040 Sub-Zero, if you're familiar with that microphone, the manufacturing tolerances are such that any 2 LCT1040s are a stereo-matched pair. You don't have to specifically think ahead and purchase a matched pair that have been matched up at the factory. Any 2 will match. So if you need to spend the money over the course of a year, any 2 of these microphones will be stereo-matched pairs. Even better, once you do have the 2 mics, you can use one remote to control both mics. Just use an XLR splitter to split the XLR that goes from the remote over to the 2 PSUs of the 2 mics. Now, both mics will respond to one remote and you'll get matched signals back. Frankly, I think that could be a game changer. Think of all of the options you have if you have 2 of these for a stereo pair. Now, there are 2 more knobs, one for a configurable high-pass filter to get the best sound right at the source. You can high-pass the bass at 40, 80, and 120 hertz, depending on your needs. And I'll let you hear what each one of these sounds like. First, the 40 hertz high-pass. This shouldn't have too much impact on my voice as a voice actor tonally, but it can pull away a ton of bass energy. Okay, then there's the 80 hertz option. And this is also probably the most common option in voice work, to cut below 80 hertz. There's not a ton of useful information down there. So in something like an audiobook production, this can stop the car subwoofer from pounding into your back or making it really fatiguing to listen to in headphones, that 80 hertz high pass filter. And then finally, there is a 120 hertz high pass. So this could remove a considerable amount of bass, and it could be useful in certain situations, depending on how you need to use it. Put that back. Now, likewise, there are multiple pads, so you can go from really quiet to super loud. There's a modest pad of 6 dB to a massive amount of padding at 24 dB. You just dial it in with the switch here. So the first one I'll switch to is the 6 dB. Now, when you switch, you should pay attention to the operational indicator here. It will take a few seconds for that pad to become engaged as the mic reconfigures itself. So it's not fully padded, or any adjustments aren't fully in place until the operational light becomes solid again. So now you can hear the 6 dB pad. If I move it to the 12 dB pad, we can see that operational light come in again. It takes a few seconds, and now we are at the full 12 dB pad. I get a lot quieter. Finally, I'll switch to the 24 dB pad. So now it's gotten quite quiet. So I can put a really loud source in front of it. I'll switch it back and let that padding come out here. Remember to watch that operation light. Some changes do require a moment for the mic to reconfigure itself. So as you make changes, watch that operational light to know if it's all the way ready to go again. I'm going to go back to clear mode now. And I'm going to dial in the 50% FET. So now we've got the mix of the tube and the FET effect, just so that we can hear it. And we'll talk about some more features. Now, like many of the Lewitt mics, the 1040 comes with an integrated and removable pop filter. And this one mounts a little differently than the other Lewitts. And you can see that there's a lot of care given here too. There are magnets to secure it in place, so it's not going to go anywhere. But you don't need to slide it over the basket like some of their other mics. It just clicks into place. So if you watched some of my other videos, you know that sliding the pop filter for their other mics, it can kind of create quite an ASMR moment, but not really here, and you won't be scratching the grill. It just clicks into place with some magnets. So you pull it off, and you can plug it back in. There we go. There we go. Got to find that. I'm not really adept at putting it in yet, but you can just pull it off and put it back on. Those magnets hold it right in place. Okay, let's switch over to warm mode now at 50%. It's a dual layer metal pop filter, so it should catch most plosives. This is not my mic, so I'm not going to do a plosive test here. I'm not going to send plosives into it. I don't want to risk damaging the capsule if I'm too aggressive with it, but there's no processing on this audio, so you'll hear if along the way, if I've sent any plosives past the pop filter, you'll hear it. So I'll just have you reference the remainder of the recording to see if there are any plosives. We can also pull it off to see if there is any transparency change between the pop filter being on and the pop filter being off. We'll see if there's any tonality change by pulling this off. It's quite see-through, and there are 2 layers of metal in this grill, so it's possible that there could be a tonality change with the pop filter in or the pop filter out, and so now you've heard it. There we go. Okay, so let's switch to another mode. We're going to switch to dark mode at 50% mixed in, and we'll go back and forth so that you can hear it. The shock mount is also worth mentioning, and it's a serious shock mount. Super robust, well made, supports the mic extremely well. And I'll be honest, I haven't quite seen a shock mount like this before. And what I'm getting at is in the way that it adjusts. It actually uses quick release levers, similar to how you might raise or lower a bike seat. So I'll do it right now, hopefully not move the mic too much. But you just release it, adjust the microphone, and then lock it back in place. You see it. No thumb screws here. It's actually a quick release lever, similar to how you might raise or lower a bike seat, like I said. It's easy to move. It's got an extremely tight grip, and you don't have to crank hard on these thumb screws to get it to be secure. That's really well thought out. It's a really well thought out shock mount. It's a wide body. It's a wide body one, so you got to have a little space for it, but it's really well thought out. I mean, when I've been doing my tests, I can put some pretty good handling on this mic without it being really transmissive. I think it's really well engineered for the job. Okay, let's move now to the saturated effect at 50% tube. The last 2 parts to talk about on the remote are the default reverse switch, and there's a hold switch on the back. This switch on the lower right-hand corner labeled default and reverse allows you to choose which side is the front side of the mic. So right now I've got the tube facing me, but with a switch, waiting for it to come back into operation. Now I'm standing at the back of the microphone, and this is the front of the microphone. I can just switch it right there. I'm going to put it back to default. There's a hold button on the back, and it has 2 purposes. First is, maybe you can see it here, but the Lewitt logo on the back in default mode is slightly illuminated. If you tap that button on the back, that illumination goes out. It's just like if you want a little bit of a stealth mode, but that little button there, you just tap it once and the mic lights up, or the logo lights up. The other purpose is with a press and hold will power the microphone down. For a vocalist, some vocalists like to have the microphone upside down and up in the air so that they can fit their copy, their music stand, or instruments underneath it. You can put this up at eye level, and Lewitt says that it doesn't matter if the microphone is hung upside down. I guess on some tube microphones, there's a concern that the heat from the tube can affect the capsule or could affect the performance of it if the tube is upside down. Lewitt says it doesn't matter here. You can arrange the microphone however it's preferable for you. So now we're going to investigate the polar patterns. So I'm going to move the microphone a little bit. We'll see how the shock filter or the pop filter or the shock mount does. Now I'm going to move it sideways to the camera. Take this off. And once it becomes operational again, I'll now arrange this in an omnidirectional pattern. And now we can sort of investigate the polar patterns a little bit. The polar pattern is adjusted with the other large knob on the microphone. So right now I have the microphone turned 90 degrees to me, and we're in omnidirectional mode. So you should be picking me up nice and clear. But what I'll do is I'll try and dial in some of the other patterns, and we'll get a sense of how that changes the performance of the microphone. Now, as we turn it, there are sort of detents in the knob that will stop the pattern at sort of the major polar patterns, but you're not limited to those. You can dial in any of the polar patterns in between. So first thing I'll do is I'll move it up to a wide cardioid. And after a few seconds, we should see the microphone come into operation again. Have to wait for that LED to stop flashing. But now we should be able to maybe detect if there's any sort of change or transformation in the tone by having it in the wide cardioid. What we're listening for here, I should still be reasonably loud, but we'll listen to see if there's any tonality change, any loss of high frequency, or anything like that. So that's the wide cardioid pattern. I'm now going to move it directly to the next detent, and that is the cardioid pattern. The cardioid pattern, the most common one for the voice actor, is one where sometimes the off-axis response can become important. So even if we have the off-axis response at 45 degrees or at 90 degrees, we should be able to hear a difference in volume, certainly, but we may also hear a difference in tone. Next, I'm going to sort of move through some of the other patterns just so we can see what the off-axis rejection and response is from the other patterns. So I'm going to move this next to the supercardioid pattern. So now we're over at the supercardioid pattern, and we should note that my voice has fallen off quite a bit, and I will move into the dead zone, sort of the real dead zone, and I can dial that in even further, but I can move into and out of the sort of the null of the supercardioid. I'm not now at like a hypercardioid pattern. And then finally, we'll move all the way to the figure 8 pattern. And once it comes into operation, I should strongly be in the null of the microphone. If you're hearing me reflected off the surfaces here in my vocal booth. I'm raising my voice nice and loud so that you can hear me. All right, let's move it back to cardioid. Okay, so now we're back to the cardioid pattern so that you can at least hear me. But that infinite polar pattern adjustment gives you a lot of freedom in setting it up. You could use this as a room microphone and dial in the pattern to get just the right amount of room compared to the signal. You could ensure that a couple of different competing acoustic instruments in the recording studio are sitting in the right nulls. That's not really my area of expertise. I primarily use a mic as a voice actor, just me in a room, but there are lots of creative possibilities there, and I'm really excited to see what some people come up with. As I rotate up to the top at cardioid, from 90 degrees off axis, Let's just take a moment and listen to the quality. What sort of high-frequency response I get. In the mic I received, there were no polar pattern graphs, so I don't know how the character should change as I move from off-axis to on. Some microphones are very directional in the highs, and some have a very wide response for the highs. So as I rotate the mic in the front as I speak, you should be able to hear, or you can note, if there are any significant changes as we move from off-axis to on-axis. If there are significant changes, I'd expect them to be in the highs, but since you can just adjust the pattern, if I move that to a wider pattern, maybe as we move that microphone off to the side, we still have some of that high-frequency response. So depending on how you have this set up, you could potentially have a couple of voices singing into one side of the microphone with the pattern adjustment and still get really good clarity, get good tonality out of everybody. So let's talk about cons. Are there any? $3,500 should not be too many, but there are some cons, and I can think of two right off the top of my head. First, you've heard as I switched between all of these different effects. I do wish the effects went perhaps just a little harder, pushing the tube a little bit more. I want perhaps something that's a bit more saturated, a bit more warmth, a bit more darkness. It's the changes you've been able to see, they're fairly subtle, detectable, but subtle. I think Lewitt, what they've done here is they're trying to balance pushing the tube hard and maximizing its longevity. This expensive mic, you want it to last 10, 20 years anyway. Since the tube is not really replaceable, it at least voids the warranty if you try and mess with that tube. So I don't think the tube is very easy to replace. So it's not pushing the tube super hard from what I can tell. And as a result, the effects they're subtle. They're not really extreme. That's one. Second, the cable that goes between the power supply and the mic is proprietary. You have to get a cable from Lewitt. You can't just go to Sweetwater or B&H or whatever and buy a new cable. So if some knucklehead in the studio messes up the cable, kinks it, breaks it, pulls it out, anything like that, you can't just run over to the cable closet and grab another one. So I suggest that if you are going to be in a high-use area, a busy studio, something like that, reach out to Lewitt and see about getting some spares before you need them, because you don't want to lose a session because of losing a cable. Third, and this really isn't a con, but just a point to know, even though there are two outputs on the back of the PSU, these are variations on the same signal. They're not outputs from different capsules. So I thought at first that the 1040 might also be compatible with the polarizer plugins from the Twin series mics from Lewitt. But these outputs are not like the Twin system of the Lewitt 640 TS. That mic also has two outputs, but those outputs are from the different capsule sides, I suppose. So they have a polarizer plugin that allows you to adjust that polar pattern after the fact. But that polarizer plugin does not work with the 1040. I actually asked them about it, and they said it would have resulted in like 6 or 7 cables that needed to come out to get both sides of the capsules. So this is purely analog. It's a mono microphone, very configurable, but it's not configurable in software. That's no plugins. It's a separate thing, but I didn't want anybody to think that because it's got the dual outputs that it's the same as the Twin system also. It's not. Other than that, aside from it being a really expensive microphone and I can't just have it in my booth right now, I don't have any other cons to think about. It ticks all the buttons that I want in a microphone. So there you have it. That's the LCT1040 mic from Lewitt, their new flagship. I cannot say how honored I've been to be included as part of the launch. A great big thank you to the folks over at Lewitt for trusting me with their microphone, trusting me with it before it was released. It's been a real honor to be considered, so I'm very grateful for it. But otherwise, that's all I have for you today on this mic. So go get yourself a microphone, any microphone, but maybe a microphone with all the trimmings, all the configurations. But get yourself a microphone, get out there and record something amazing. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.